Dangers of Drug Abuse by Dr. Hardin B. Jones. Drugs have been discovered to prevent and cure physical diseases and reverse the disturbances that occur in some mental illnesses. Excitement over what drugs can do has led people to believe that any ailment, infective or psychic, can be relieved by taking a pill. At the first sign of nervousness, they try pep pills. Medical journals now advertise tranquilizers, amphetamines, and other mood altering drugs. Doctors prescribe them, and the public expects miracles from them. In such an atmosphere, it is not surprising that drug abuse has spread. When people become dependent on drugs to solve their problems, they lose the capacity to deal with life situations through perseverance, self discipline, and mental effort. It is now often considered naive to expend energy on solving a problem when there is an easy way out. It is a simple step from look what drugs do for me when I feel depressed to imagine what drug can do for me when I feel good already. A distinction must be made, however, between medicines and the sensual drugs. We must not disdain the real and important advances science has made. The history of the medical use of drugs goes back 23 centuries to Hippocrates, the Greek physician who is regarded as the father of medicine. He was the first to recognize that a remedy must take into account not only the symptoms of the disease but also the constitution and habits of the patient. His principles have come down to us as the dictum that the medicine must specifically suit the disease and the patient. That is, when there is a disorder, only a drug that specifically mitigates that disorder should be used. The drug should also have restorative effects or it will unbalance healthy functions of the brain and the body. The correlative of this principle is that a healthy person cannot benefit from taking a drug. This too comes from Hippocrates, who said, persons in good health quickly lose their strength by taking purgative medicines. The distinction between medicines and sensual drugs is simple. Sensual drugs are those that the body has no need for, but that give the user a strong sense of pleasure. Sensual drugs activate the brain's pleasure centers. We do not know precisely how they do this, whether they stimulate the pleasure centers directly or activate them through chemical mimicry. In this context, I will refer to both possibilities as stimulation. The brain governs sensations, moods, thoughts, and actions not by a magical process but by an incredibly complex series of chemically regulated controls. These are easily upset by sensual drugs. This disturbance is apparent in the effect of the sensual drugs on the mechanisms that control pleasure and satisfaction. A drug user's craving for the drug continues, but he feels less and less satisfaction. His brain's pleasure reflexes seem to be weakened by artificial stimulation. In severe addiction, the pleasure mechanisms fail to respond to drug stimulation. The drug then imparts only relative relief from misery and suspends the illness of withdrawal. Information from the senses still reaches the brain, but the brain is unable to evaluate the information and interpret it as pleasurable. In contrast, naturally attained pleasure enlarges the sense of satisfaction and can be repeated indefinitely. Ultimately, the sensory deprivation of the drug addict manifests itself in a general feeling of physical discomfort and in personality changes. The addict feels depressed and fails to respond either to his environment or to other people. His mental disturbance can be quite similar to paranoia. He cannot discern the source of his problem and looks for the cause in everything about himself. Anything external is suspect. He draws further and further into himself. The addict often feels people are looking at him strangely. One told me he wasn't sure when people smiled at him that they were not really laughing. The addict can even lose his sense of being alive. He feels dead inside. One rehabilitated heroin addict described his sensory deprivation to me. Looking out of the window, he said, "The sun is shining, the flowers are in bloom. I know these are signs of a good day, but," pressing his chest, "I don't feel it in here." I have seen addicts habitually press their fingers deep into their arms or legs as if to reassure themselves of their own reality. This craving for lost sensations explains in part the addict's need to continue to seek drug induced sensations. If drugs offered a safe form of pleasure, there might be few objections to using them. However, the claims that they are safe must be recognized as fake in the face of the known consequences of continued drug use. Real dangers exist, although the drug user often assumes they do not, because the harmful side effects are not immediately apparent. Possibly, results range from incidental delirious effects to death from overdose. The dangers that lie between the extremes are the regeneration of health and the depletion of brain function. Drugs, after all, act directly on the brain and cause mental mechanisms to respond abnormally. The risks are great for the persistent user. In particular, there is the danger that he will do himself a great deal of harm before the warning symptoms occur. Drug related health disorders are many and varied. Dirty needles and solutions used for injecting drugs can cause abscesses in the arms and veins and infection of the kidneys and brain. Sniffing cocaine and amphetamines can damage the tissue of the nose, and marijuana and tobacco smoking can cause lung diseases. Heavy users of alcohol, volatile solvents, amphetamines, or marijuana may find that their livers are permanently damaged. Babies of women addicted to opiates are likely to be born addicted and to suffer from withdrawal symptoms. Cocaine and amphetamines can cause hair to fall out. Recent research has indicated that marijuana can damage cells. A drug user's way of life makes him more susceptible to pneumonia, tuberculosis, malnutrition, and weight loss. Finally, an overdose of any of the essential drugs can lead to respiratory or cardiac failure and death. Essential drugs affect the chemistry of the brain cells. Cell function is carried out by thousands of enzymes acting within each cell. Depending on how the cell chemistry adds up, the cell either reinforces or shifts the dominance of cell pathways and hookups. Each exposure of the cells to psychoactive drugs somehow alters their chemistry. Toxic chemicals can easily upset the delicate chemical balance of the brain's intricate system of communication. They may also damage cell tissue. Toxic effects may be transitory or permanent depending on the cell damage. This article focuses on the effects of drugs on the brain. This is not to minimize their effects on their other parts of the body, for these can sometimes be more debilitating. Damage to the brain, however, is the most subtle, most often unrecognized, and least understood consequence of drug abuse. Thank you.